I don't know what you want. If you're looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
The Taken franchise has a unique place among the canon of great action films. The films essentially completely reinvented Liam Neeson as an actor for new audiences and launched an entire subgenre of films carried entirely by his newfound bona fides as the next great Hollywood action star. So, what happened? How did this promising film series take such a nosedive into mediocrity? Ultimately, it fell victim to one of the greatest challenges any movie franchise faces: a fear of reinvention.
This is gonna end bad for you.
Don't be such a pessimist.
But before we get an angry phone call from Brian Mills, don't forget to subscribe to Nerdstalgic. The year is 2008, only a few months before audiences would be, well, taken by Taken. The first Iron Man film soared into theaters. Studios didn't know it then, but this would be the shot across the bow for the entire film industry. It's this summer where the modern feverish chase by every single studio to build the next Marvel Cinematic Universe would have its quiet beginning. All of this context is to put into perspective why Taken is truly one of the last of its kind, a star-driven action blockbuster. At this point in the history of movies, the action genre is in the midst of an identity crisis. By 2008, the reign of the great action movie stars like Schwarzenegger and Stallone had ended. It was an era ended by a mixture of increasingly diminishing returns in both box office and film quality. Not to mention the earliest superhero films, especially the Raimi Spider-Man or the Singer X-Men, were huge hits, proving that audiences were ready for a different class of hero, which is exactly what Liam Neeson was for action blockbusters when he first appeared as Brian Mills in the original Taken film. Neeson's prestige as an actor was something very out of the ordinary for this type of boilerplate action film. His high-caliber status as an actor lends the film more artistic credibility than a Jean-Claude Van Damme or a Steven Seagal ever could muster. The film was pitched to director Pierre Morel by producer Luc Besson, and almost immediately, Liam Neeson was sought after to play the lead. According to Neeson himself, he originally did not envision his rebirth as an action star to happen. In an interview with GQ, Neeson said, "I wanted to do more physical stuff. I really thought it would be kind of a little side road for my so-called career. Really thought it would go straight to video, but it just got great word of mouth. I was stunned." Despite his surprise, if you look back on Neeson's filmography, you can see a burgeoning action movie star has always been lurking behind his award-worthy reputation. Some of his earliest roles were in large-scale action films like Excalibur or The Deadpool, to taking on a skewed version of a crime fighter in Sam Raimi's Darkman, to only a few years before Taken, playing Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins. Neeson's career has a surprising amount of action film highlights for a guy who, until Taken, was seen almost exclusively as a serious thespian. When you go back and watch the original trailer for the first Taken, it's evident how much the entire film was sold completely on Liam Neeson's gravitas. His over-the-phone monologue to the ransomers who kidnapped his daughter Kim became instantly iconic. However, it's impossible to imagine some of the other iconic action stars delivering the same speech to the same effect.
I'm gonna take you to the bank, Senator Trent. To the blood bank.
This single monologue and Neeson's steely delivery probably earned the film about 50% of its box office alone. The movie, while certainly entertaining, is a gritty, stripped-down, meat-and-potatoes thriller. Its success rests almost entirely on Neeson. So with all this success, what went wrong with the other Taken films? With any film franchise, the biggest question you have to ask when it comes to sequels is, does this film justify its own existence? The answer for both films is a resounding no. One of the major problems is that the premise of the original Taken franchise really only has one core idea. Someone Brian Mills knows gets taken. It's a premise that can't be replicated without quickly getting stale. At a certain point, if someone in your life is getting kidnapped multiple times, maybe you need to start taking stock of your own choices rather than getting mad at everyone else.
I killed your son because he kidnapped my daughter.
Pierre Morel, director of the first Taken film, similarly felt another Taken film would just be a rehash of the same story. He turned down the opportunity to direct the second film. With Morel out, director Olivier Megaton would take over directorial duties for the second and third films. While the films were financially successful, the stories are utterly middling. Taken 2 proves Pierre Morel's instincts about the original film correct. It just couldn't be replicated without feeling like an absolute retread.
Your mother and I are gonna be taken.
It also squanders its two most intriguing ideas almost immediately. First, the film's villains are made up of entirely the friends and families of the people Brian Mills killed in the previous film. The film's opening with a mass funeral for everyone who was murdered in the first Taken is the kind of unintentionally hilarious action movie camp you don't see enough of these days. But there's a kernel of a clever idea here. This opening sequence digs into a somewhat subversive premise to directly hold an action hero accountable for all those he killed by having him confront their friends and families. However, by the halfway point of the movie, the film is no longer interested in any level of deconstruction or moral questioning of its lead, and it immediately wants us to cheer on another murderous dad rampage. The other wasted idea is that the film sets up a reversal of the first movie, where Brian and his ex-wife Lenore are kidnapped, and instead, Kim must step up to perform the rescue. The early sequences of Brian coaching his daughter on how to be the lead of an action movie is actually quite entertaining, including an increasingly ludicrous sequence where Kim haphazardly throws live grenades in two civilian areas so her dad can pinpoint her location. For a moment, Taken 2 seems as if it's about to become the story of Kim becoming an action star in her own right. But the movie is too eager to abandon the premise, as well as in favor of getting Liam Neeson back to murdering an endless supply of nameless goons through horribly edited hand-to-hand combat sequences. Ultimately, Taken 2's greatest sin is that it sets up two far more interesting ideas for films and then becomes nearly indistinguishable from the original movie. Instead of taking risks, it decides to play it safe, which ends up being the death knell of the franchise. Immediately post-Taken 2, Liam Neeson openly stated in an interview that it was unlikely a third Taken film would happen. Despite the critical thrashing the film took, the third movie was brought into production rather quickly, with Taken 3 arriving in theaters 2 years after Taken 2. Neeson's reservations about the third film were no doubt quickly erased when he was reportedly paid nearly half of Taken 3's $48 million budget to appear in the film. Taken 3 similarly struggles to come up with a reason to justify its own existence. Now, credit where it's due, the film does do something different with its plot. Here, Lenore is murdered, and Brian is framed for a crime and must clear his name. So the something different, in this case, is copy the plot of The Fugitive.
I didn't kill my wife! I don't care!
At this point, Liam Neeson is 61 years old, and his believability in this role is straining credulity. This is most evident during the poorly edited action sequences, including the infamous fence jump that requires chaotic, haphazard editing just to make us believe Neeson can climb a fence. The franchise can no longer hide that it's not just the premise of Taken that has been worn out, its star has been too. In the end, this ability to experiment and push itself to new heights is what did the Taken films in. It could have easily been the proto-John Wick. When viewed in the context of John Wick, it's like looking into a mirror world where the producers at the head of the franchise had real vision. They're both fairly straightforward action franchises, but where Taken chose stagnation, Wick chose reinvention and diversification. The plan going forward with John Wick is to have the feature films focus on the continuing adventures of the character of John, while the TV show The Continental will focus on the world building and long-term development of various factions of lethal assassins. This carving up of the narrative real estate will help to generate more opportunities for exciting crossovers and story developments. This eye towards diversification is exactly what Taken should have done, but didn't have the gall for. If it had either tried to set up an interconnected universe or just taken bold and unconventional approaches to making sequels that were a departure from the original film, it could have been a franchise for the ages. But ultimately, it didn't have the ambition, know-how, or gumption to really swing for the fences. And thus, we got this. What do you think? Is there still a possibility of more Taken films, or is the franchise better off left alone? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you next time with Nerdstalgic.